It's good to see all of you this morning. And they set some of the columns back up. And this is about all that there is to see at Thyatira. And of course, it was not one of the most popular cities in Asia Minor, and not like Ephesus and Philadelphia and some of those. But it was still important to the people that lived in that region, and the Roman government considered it important enough to have one of their major roads running through. And what we're looking at here is part of the roadway. A lot of those cities had columns, beautiful columns that lined both sides of the road, even if there was no buildings there. And that's what we're looking at here. In the background is part of the road. I've not done this a whole lot, but I thought maybe since Thyatira is not one of the most talked about cities in the New Testament, I went to Smith's Dictionary, and this is an article in Smith's Bible Dictionary. Some of you may have Smith's Bible Dictionary at home. You can get it in a 1 volume, which is condensed, or you can get it in 3 volumes, which is the way it was first published. And Smith says in this, Thyatira, a city of Lycus, that was one of the, it was not really a colony. Well, I guess you could call it a colony, but it was not really one of the regions where they had a governor over it. In other words, Lycus was under the governor in this region. And so I couldn't tell you which province. That's the word I'm looking for. It was not a province. It was just a region within a certain province, and I'm surprised that Smith didn't give us the information on what province it was in. But we can go back and look at the map, and that's what I'll do when we get down toward the end, so I don't lose my place. I'll go back and show you where in Asia Minor this was located. Okay, it's a city well, Lycus is a river. What am I thinking? It's a city on the Lycus, founded by Seleucus Nicator. It lay to the left of the road from Pergamus to Sardis, 27 miles from the last city, Sardis, and on the very confines of Mysia. Now, Mysia and Ionis were provinces, and so it lay close to these, but it was not in them. So, but I don't know why he didn't tell us what it was in. But so as to sometimes reckon with one and sometimes within the other. So the boundaries sort of swap back and forth. It's sort of like that boundary between France and Germany. Over the last 200 years, it swapped parts, swapped sides at least 3 different times, because there was 3 major wars fought partly over that. And it says dyeing, and we're not talking about death, but we're talking about the art of dyeing garments. Dyeing apparently formed an important part of the industrial activity of Thyatira, as it did that of Colossae and Laodicea. So you know where the purple came from? It came from seashells, a certain kind of sea animal. And so that obviously, if they weren't sitting on the coast, and it wasn't, they would have to have that brought in from the sea. But they used it in making garments. It is first mentioned in connection with Lydia, a seller of purple. Acts chapter 16, verse 14. One of the 7 churches of Asia was established here. Revelation 2, verses 18 through 29, and that's what we're looking at this morning. The principal deity, and we're talking about the Roman pagan gods now, of the city was Apollo. Apollo was a god of war. And so they worshiped Apollo. Mars would be the Roman counterpart, and that's where Mars Hill gets its name there in Athens, is from the god Mars. So Apollo or Mars, if you were Greek, it's Apollo. If you were Roman, it's Mars. And so the activity of Thyatira, as it did, let's see. Well, I backed up too far. Okay, one of the 7 churches of Asia was established here. The principal deity of the city was Apollo, but there was another superstition of an extremely curious nature, which seems to have been brought thither or there by some of the corrupt Jews of the dispersed tribes. Now, he's talking about some of the Jews that were on the fringes of the Babylonian, and some that had been taken by the Assyrians 100 and something years before that. In 722, the Assyrians came in and took the northern capital away, or the northern kingdom, and that was Jews also. They were the apostate Jews. And then in 586, Nebuchadnezzar, as a Babylonian king, came and took, over a process of 3 different times, took away the captives in the south. And so there were some on the fringes, and they didn't stay as tightly knit as those that Daniel and Ezekiel and some of the others were associated with. So that's what he's talking about here. Some on the fringes, he said. I don't know what that's a misspelled word there for sure. It says a fane stood outside the walls dedicated to Sambatha. I don't know what a fane is. I should have looked that up. I think that's a misspelled word, though, because whatever it is, it had to do with the worship of Sambatha. The name of the Sibyl, who is sometimes called Chaldean, sometimes Jewish, sometimes Persian, in the midst of an enclosed designated the Chaldean court. Sibyl was a woman prophetess, and so there was a prophetess that was connected with the Babylonians. So this is the city that this church is sitting in, and no wonder things started getting into it that shouldn't be there. This seems to lend an illustration to the obscure passage Revelation 2:20 and 21, which some interpret of the wife of the bishop as the wife of the bishop. In other words, this Jezebel that it talks about. And we're going to look at that a little later. But I'm not going to read all of this because you already see that this city was really messed up pagan-wise. And they were worshiping gods from different places. I mean, you know, the Sibyl was connected to the Babylonians. And then we have the Greek god Apollo being worshipped here, and the Romans connected that also. So the place was filled with idolatry. Okay, in verse 18 it says, "Unto the angel of the church in Thyatira write these things, saith the Son of God, who hath the eyes like unto a flame of fire, and his feet like brass." Okay, I've already shown you some images in the beginning, how Jesus was described there in the midst of the seven churches. And so I'm not going to belabor this by showing you a lot of pictures that represent this. But the flame of fire, we'd think of this more like the flame on a torch, something that pierces. You know, it can just burn right through. And that's how the heat of the flame is understood to be. And or like when Nebuchadnezzar had Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thrown in the furnace, and it was so hot that it killed the people that threw them in the furnace. And so that's pretty hot. And so he's saying that Jesus has eyes like a flame of fire. In other words, he can see inside you. He knows. That's why even on the earth, as the Son of Man, he was walking around. He could see, if he wanted to, he could see what was in the heart of the people. And the Bible expresses that in different places throughout the four Gospels. So he's portrayed then as, you might sum this up as the all-seeing eye. He can see everything. And his feet were like fine brass. Brass, in this time frame, iron, of course, was much more stronger than brass. But brass, for centuries and centuries, was the strongest metal that the ancient world knew. And so he's portrayed here. I don't know, is this thing working now? Okay, we better change that battery then. I thought I was echoing there. I should have got Chris to show me how to do this, because okay, there we go. Give me just a second here. And all these little gadgets you have to remove. Okay. Hopefully that's the one. Well, maybe I put it in upside down. Of course, you could strip it too. I'm sorry, Son of God, who hath the eyes. In other words, that in a sense symbolizes, and he reared up, he talking about Ahab, he went and worshiped this God. Here's a king who has married a pagan. The Exodus married the sons of those people, because he goes on to say, marry the sons of those people, because he goes on to say, they will turn their hearts, turn to worship another God. He always respected, or at least he acknowledged, the God of heaven. God's people marries into these other people